Well, good morning, everyone. Thomas Montgomery here. It's a beautiful Monday morning, July 17th, 2023. We get together with our distribution partners and now our clients each morning or most mornings, most weekdays at 8 o'clock Central to talk about strategies, tips, techniques, and share success stories. Sure enough, today, success stories is the topic of the day. So I did send out this agenda to each of you in advance. So those of you that are distribution partners should have had this agenda, and the rest of you are welcome to plug in here as we begin. We want to talk about our credit and funding success stories. Before we get into the credit and funding program, I think it's important that we all have a common and consistent understanding of how credit and funding works. So let's start with credit. How does one improve their credit score? Now, this is kind of a blanket statement because the devil's in the details of what needs to be done to a given credit profile. But in general, what is it that allows us to have a better credit score? In general, it's doing two things: removing negative, in other words, taking away derogatory items off the credit report, and secondly, adding positive trade lines. Because the credit reporting bureaus, whether it be on the consumer side or the business side, essentially they're managing a database of transactions, and the users of the credit reports, typically lenders, finance companies, and so forth, are accessing that data to assess risk. So the higher the credit score that an individual has, in general, they are perceived to be less risky. Now, there's some other variables that go into it regarding the overall credit profile, but let's leave that alone for now. Let's just talk about credit scores. So the higher the score that an individual and or business has, they're perceived to be less risky. And in fact, there's actually these graphs, these algorithms that show the probability of default. So the lower the score, the higher the probability that that individual or business will default. So it's a predictor of risk. So would any business and or any individual be better off with a higher credit score than a lower one? Absolutely, because they're perceived by the rest of the world as being less risky. So that can impact their access to loans and financing, but even individuals, that can affect access to housing, cost of insurance, cost of transportation, financing, and so forth. So credit impacts us very broadly. So it certainly makes sense that as individuals and as business owners, we want to have as strong of a credit profile and score as possible. And again, bringing it back, in general, the way that we get ideal credit scores, optimal credit scores, is by removing negative items and adding positive. Now, we need to do that legally and ethically, of course, but that's the premise. Then, so we just had a 101 on credit. Now, if we flip it over to funding, it means getting access to capital or financing, and it is usually the result of going through underwriting. So different types of funding and financing have different underwriting criteria. In other words, they look at different things. But in general, same thing that you and I learned in school, in general, it usually is going to involve the 3 C's: credit, collateral, capacity. Capacity also means cash flow. Now, there's different types of lenders, different types of funding, if you will, that don't always look at all 3 C's, but usually it's some combination of those 3 C's. So now that takes us to our credit and funding success stories, because that's what you and I offer. That's how we help people, is to improve their 3 C's, because that's what makes it possible. Remember, we're guaranteeing them funding. Well, how in the world would we guarantee them funding? Well, we're improving their 3 C's. That's what allows that to happen. It's not magic. It's not a mystery. It's not a shell game, but you and I can help people improve their credibility, which allows them to get approved for funding. Make sense? So within the credit and funding program, we offer it with no upfront cost. And this is a very important attribute because some people just don't want to pay anything upfront. Some people can't afford to pay anything upfront. So we've alleviated that. We've talked about that on different trainings. Last week, we kind of immersed ourselves into several training sessions with a deep understanding of the credit and funding program that you can refer back to if you want. But what's nice is you and I offer to the marketplace the credit and funding program with no upfront cost. Now, again, there is a refundable setup fee, but that can be financed. Let's briefly identify the 4 things they get. And if you understand this, I think you'll see the value proposition because it ties back to what people need to get funding. They need to have credibility in the 3 C's. So let's go through what they receive briefly, see if you have any questions, and then we'll get into our success stories. So one of the things that we do with the credit and funding program, again, with no upfront cost, is we provide free assistance in addressing derogatory negative credit. Well, we talked about that a moment ago. Why is that important? Well, if we want to have an optimal credit score, then it's a function of removing negative when applicable and adding positive. So of course, the first item on the list is this, helping people remove negative items legally and ethically. Because again, we talked about our credit report, whether it be personal or business, reflects how we've paid in the past. Have we paid as agreed? How risky are we going forward? Because no one knows the future, but they can look at our past and assess. So there are instances where those negative items can be removed or blocked off the credit report legally and ethically. And that's the first part of this value proposition. Now, does everyone need negative items removed from their credit report? No. That's why we start out with a credit analysis to determine what's going on with the credit report, what needs to be done, because we need to get them prepared for funding. But the first element is removing negative items for free. So are we a credit repair company? We are not. We do not do credit repair. Do we sell credit repair? No. In fact, this assistance, it's a legal-based model using attorneys and paralegals, and it is free. Okay, let's move on to the next. Well, we said that if we want to improve credit, we need to be conscious and purposeful in removing negative, if applicable, and adding positive. So sure enough, number 2 on the list of the value proposition is helping clients add positive trade lines, because taking negative away alone is not going to give us an optimal score. It's the removal of negative, if applicable, and the addition of positive, if needed. So let's pause there. We've got a big group today. Anyone have questions on the credit portion of the credit and funding? Because there's more benefits forthcoming, but I want to pause there and see if everyone's clear. So what we need to do is when a client enrolls in the credit and funding program, we have them do a soft credit pull, we evaluate that, and then we have a consultation with them so we can create a personalized plan. There's not a generic answer to what needs to be done to optimize an individual's credit profile. The conceptual models here, number 1 and 2, but the devil's in the details. We need to look at the client's profile and work with them in implementing a specific plan. Okay, we all good there? Number 3, we're going to also help with the other C. So we said earlier, what does it take to get funding? Some combination of the 3 C's, credit, collateral, and capacity. Different funding sources have different underwriting criteria. So on 1 and 2, we've helped clients improve one of the C's, their credit. Now what we're going to do is help them with both their collateral and their capacity. Well, why would we do that? Isn't this just making it too complicated? Well, what do you and I know? to get approved for funding, it typically comes down to the 3 C's. And so if all we did is paid attention to one of the 3 C's, we might qualify for funding, but typically we'll have more options and more funding, more borrowing capacity if we also address the other 2 C's. And that's in fact what you and I do. Therefore, we transfer real assets over to them at no cost. It's part of the credit and funding program. They don't have to ask for it. They don't have to plead for it. They don't have to pay for it. That's packaged in. Well, why would we do that? Again, because it affects our ability to help them getting funded. Because when assets are placed on their financials, then that provides what's called collateral. So now they have more borrowing capacity. And that's what they're wanting. They're wanting, right? They're wanting 2 things, right? Better credit and funding. Now, the third C, capacity, also known as cash flow, also is benefited by this, because literally what we're doing is putting new cash flow, new bank deposits into their pocket, and that improves their borrowing capacity. So again, different lenders have different underwriting criteria. Almost all of them will use some combination of the 3 C's. So you don't have to have all 3 C's for all types of funding, but the more C's we have, the more credible we are. And then the end result, because people tend, and I'm not speaking negatively, but people tend to want the end result, right? And anything else is a distraction, a burden, a pain in their ass, right? So I understand, why do people enroll in the credit and funding program? It's like the making of the sausage. They don't really want to see how the sausage is made. They just want to be able to eat the bratwurst, right? Grill it and eat it, for example. So the end result is we're promising them in writing guaranteed results within a short amount of time, because we believe that people don't want to pay up front. I believe that people want guaranteed results, and I believe people want fast results. And what you and I bring to the marketplace is all those 3. So most of our distribution partners set goals of 1 client per day. You know, some of you are top performers, some of you are average, and I guess a few of you are below average. Statistically, that has to be the case. But the bottom line is you make about $3,000 for each client you enroll in credit and funding. You get paid $100 upfront amount plus 3% of their capital raise. So it's a little bit over $3,000 on the low end. If they have a larger capital raise, then of course you're making more. So what I would encourage each of you to do is just set a goal of 1 a day. 1 a day is simple and easily measured, right? You get up in the morning, I better go get my 1 enrollment today. Doesn't require a lot of time, a lot of commitment, a lot of attention, but by the end of the day, you can reflect back, well, was I successful or not? If we set goals that are 1 every couple days or 2 a week, you could do that, but then it's just not as tangible. It becomes more abstract, and it's like, oh, I don't need to do anything today, I'll just do it tomorrow. So it's up to you. If you are one of our small business consultants, you have a 30-day grace period, and after that you've promised to enroll at least 2 clients a week, 8 a month. So that would be fine, and that would be a nice side gig for you, about $25,000 a month. 3,000 times 8, which is 24,000, I know. But I would encourage you to not just shoot for the minimum. Let's work together, set a goal of 1 per day. And there's going to be some days we'll knock out a couple, and some days we lay a goose egg. But if an extra $3,000 a day for just simply referring clients into a program that literally pays them to participate isn't attractive to you, then maybe we should all come work for you. Because if you've got a better way for a side gig to reasonably make $3,000 a day, that's good. I mean, and I know some of you are very successful, but $3,000 a day, average of $30 days in a month, you know, you're pushing, you're butting right up against 6 digits a month. That's a very reputable side gig. So before I get to the success stories, does anyone have questions on kind of the big picture? And then we'll talk about how the program works and give you quantifiable results and all that. That's our purpose today. But if you don't understand the big picture, then the rest are just facts and figures. All right, Eddie says this is very clear, and he was not clear before that the assets are included, and they are. They are. And then he also mentioned that the $100,000 guarantee is what gets people's attention, and I agree. People don't want risk. They don't want, in general, they don't want to have to pay up front. They don't want to risk losing money, and they don't want to risk failure. We've been able to eliminate that. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into success stories. And we've gone through success stories before. I personally don't like spending a lot of time on these because these are individual instances. And the last thing that I or you should be doing is going out and telling people, oh, well, the very first client that went through on their TransUnion, they went from 524 to 748, Experian 528 to 748, and 518 to 734. This all happened around 30 days. This happened for the first client. You should expect that too, because we can't project that out to every individual. There's different circumstances. What are the derogatories that we need to remove? Do they need new positive trade lines? Are they responsive to that? Are they keeping their bills current while we're going through the process? So there are variables, but I want to share with you success stories so there's no question that you or anyone else can have. The program works. It absolutely works. We do what we promise to do, and we put that in writing. But I don't think that you should go out and promise someone these same results because their circumstances could very well be different. So there's one example. Rodney, another client, real client. We added 161 points to his TransUnion, 77 to Experian, 112 on Equifax, got 14 negative items off. DeAndre, 102 on TransUnion, 158 on Experian, 122 on Equifax, 16 items removed. Charles, after we went through the credit and funding, went up to a 744 on TransUnion, 741 on Experian, 748 on Equifax, 12 items blocked. So we're not going to go out and guarantee some specific credit score. And people that don't know as much about credit as you and I sometimes will say, well, I want an 800 credit score. Well, I mean, anyone can get an 800 credit score, but that happens after a period of time, right? Part of the credit score, well, there's different variables that go into it, but one of which is how long have we been doing things well. So getting people up to a 700, very doable. We'd never want to promise getting people up to an 800 because that typically takes time. But what you and I really want to focus on is being good enough, right? Because with the credit and funding program, we want to get them good enough for at least 100,000. Now, I know a lot of clients want more and they deserve more and all of that, but the deal is we're going to get them good enough for 100,000. Now, anything above that is wonderful. All right, and so let's see, that was DeAndre. Forget if we did Charles, and then there's Devin here. He went up to a 758 on two of the bureaus, 762 on the third. Tammy up to 720, 764, only a 674 in Equifax. So there certainly can be differences in the three bureaus based upon what's reporting positive and what's reporting negative. One of the aces in the hole that we have is adding positive trade lines, because sometimes that can have a greater impact than even removing negative. And so that's what you and I do with the credit and funding program. Who has questions, comments, concerns? And of course, you can reach out to us individually, but let's open it up for discussion. Who has questions on the credit and funding program as far as the results? All right, Timothy is asking about the free credit repair program that we just launched yesterday. All right, let me stop the share for a second and I'll pull that up so we can look at that. Give me just a second and I'll show that to you. What wasn't our goal today, but give me just a second and I'll pull that up. who has other questions that we can look at while I'm pulling that up? Second to get to Timothy's question. All right. Stop the share. I'm going to reshare it, make sure you can see it. So this is getting to Timothy's point. So we added a new page over the weekend to each of your replicated websites, and it is meant to be a method to be able to help invite clients to kind of get into the funnel easily. And we call it the free credit repair. So it's a new page on your replicated website. You'll see that now. So we'll go through this briefly. The question that it asked, Timothy, is, are you looking for better credit? We have an innovative grant-funded solution to that problem. Simply put, we help remove negative and add positive trade lines. So this is not providing the funding portion. This is just the credit portion. This does not replace the credit and funding program, which still exists. This is just simply helping on the credit side. So we did add a couple sample success stories, and then for someone to go through this process, they just simply complete this form, comes in, and there's not much to it, as you can see, and then we're going to send them a link to complete a soft credit pull so we can do an analysis and create a plan. So that wasn't the intended topic for today, Timothy, but the free credit repair is a new page that's on your website. But it certainly does not replace the credit and funding program, which does a lot more, right? The credit and funding program is transferring those $10,000 of assets over to build cash flow and collateral. That's not included in the free credit repair. The credit and funding program is guaranteeing $100,000 in funding. The free credit repair doesn't do anything on the funding side. It's just helping with the credit. So don't be confused. But yeah, this is a nice door opener to get conversations going with people, and it's real. All right, so who else has questions, comments, concerns about the credit and funding program? You each should have a replicated website, a little intro video. You refer people to your page, they fill this out, hit the blue bar, maybe it's purple, but hit the get started here bar. That'll allow them to accept terms and conditions, and then bam, you have a client, you're paid, we work with them. We handle all the implementation. Anyone have any questions, comments, concerns? And Sarah's right, this page here, if you really understand this page, you'll understand the value proposition well, because you can watch the little 5-minute video. But what we're doing with the credit and funding is addressing the 3 C's, the 3 C's. What does it take to qualify for funding? Credit, capacity, collateral, just like we talked about, no different. And again, we're providing $10,000 assets. So you could jokingly say that we literally pay people to participate in the credit and funding program. Instead of them paying us, they have no upfront cost because they can finance the refundable deposit, and we're transferring to them typically within 24 hours, $10,000. I mean, who wouldn't want to do that? I think the only reason that anyone could struggle to enroll people is if you don't understand it, and or if you're not following our process. Because what did we talk about on a separate training? Should you be providing your link out to this website and just hoping people will navigate and enroll? Absolutely not. That's not the best practice. So let's just briefly role play what the best practice is. So we have Alonzo on this morning. Alonzo is one of our top distribution partners, but I'll just role play with Alonzo. So let's say Alonzo is a prospect for the credit and funding program. So maybe he responded to my ad or he was referred to me. I'm not talking about how leads are generated at the moment. But what I want to do is get on the phone with Alonzo. Ring, ring. Alonzo answers. Hey, Alonzo, Tom here with the credit and funding program. You had expressed some interest in our credit and funding program. I wanted to see if you qualify for this grant subsidized resource. Do you have 2 or 3 minutes so we can see if we can get you plugged in for better credit and a guaranteed $100,000 of funding. If he says no, and say, okay, let me know when you're available. I'll send you a quick text. And then I text him my number. But most likely he'll say, sure, yeah, I've got 3 minutes. Let's do it. So then what am I going to do? I'm going to text Alonzo at that time when I'm on the phone with him, my link. So each of you have a link that's going to bring them to your website, not the generic website. So I'm going to text that to him and he's going to pull it up. So then I'm going to just give Alonzo a very brief summary. And then I'm going to encourage him to go ahead and get the information packet. So I'd say, okay, Alonzo, great. The credit and funding program does 4 things. Remember, we just talked about those. We help you remove negative items. We help you add positive trade lines. We transfer $10,000 of assets over, income producing assets, to give you collateral and cash flow. We guarantee a minimum of $100,000 in funding within 30 days. Why don't we go ahead and see if you qualify? Okay, Alonzo, do you have the link I just sent you? He says yes. If not, I'm going to send it to him again. Say, okay, Alonzo, go ahead and scroll down a bit, and it's going to ask you just for some basic information, Alonzo. It's going to ask you for your name, first name, last name, email, and phone. Can you go ahead and put that in for me while I'm on the phone here? I'll stand by if you need any help with that, of course, Alonzo. But have to be a fool to need help putting in those 4 fields of information. And it's okay, Alonzo, once you have that in, go ahead and hit the Get Started Here button. And then that'll take him to the next page. Just stay with him on the phone, walk him through the steps, and 9 out of 10 people will sign up right then when you're on the phone with them, because you're a real person, you're able to answer questions, and you guide them through the process. Now, some of you are worried, well, what if they ask a question I don't understand? Chances are this: if you go through your page here and understand what's on this page, possibly view last week's training sessions, but if at least you just understand what's on this page, you most likely would know enough. And then you can always let your prospect know, hey, no worries, you got some detailed questions. They're going to assign a mentor that's going to work with you. Let's go ahead and get you put in the system. They'll assign a mentor and they'll work with you on the details. Again, 9 out of 10 people will sign up if you take that process. You're on the phone with them, you send them your link, you walk them through the steps. But if you try to get passive and just send out your link to 1 million people, most of those million won't do it because they don't know you, they don't trust you, they want to talk to someone first. Thank you for that question. Who else has questions, comments, concerns on the credit and funding program? And then, of course, we talked about the success stories a few minutes ago. That was the real topic today. All right, well, I think we've got it covered. So again, let us know if you have any questions, comments, concerns. We'll see you back tomorrow morning. Have a great day.